the Dhammapada has many, many verses. Verses that are very much related with our lives. However, when you ask any teacher or any Buddhist who knows the Dhammapada, they usually will gravitate towards the very first verse. And that has been stuck with me for many, many years. And there's so many nuances attached to it. It's like Indra's net in Mahayana. It's like, when you look at a facet of a diamond, on every aspect, if you take a chip, chip away a tiny little portion of the diamond, it's still a diamond. And that is the same way with the Dhamma. Whichever way you look at it. And the same principles that whether it's the Four Noble Truths, Satipatthana Sutta, whether it's the Eightfold Path, you still have the same flavor anywhere you go and pick and choose a verse, as it were. And so is the case with the first one. I'll recite it, I'll just say it in Pali first. Mano pubbhangama dhamma, mano setta manomaya. Mind is the forerunner of all states. Mind is chief. Everything is mind-made. And, this is pretty much about 2,600 years ago. And then you hear things about people's intentions. When you study psychology, when you're looking at commercials, when you're looking at advertisements, when you're seeing the philosophy that many of us are following today in our lives, you see how we have almost zero control of our thoughts. We're just on this automatic pilot, as it were. We're just living our lives, in a way where there is no intention attached to it, as it were. There's so much of our actions, our words, that we're just careless about. I mean, not intentionally in a sense, but procrastination leads us to not care enough. The moment we go to sleep, for example, the moment we wake up in the morning. The principles of Buddhism is not found necessarily in just textbooks or in Dhamma talks or in the lives of just the teachers. It is in everyone's life. It's present. It's there. It's accessible to all of us to choose from and intentionally live our lives with. And there is no difference, therefore. There is no difference between the teachings that were given by the Buddha over 2,000 years ago and the choices we get to make here, today, as you're pulling your car out, as you're driving, as you're deciding on making that phone call that is somewhat unsettling. You do not want to speak with that person. You do not want to think about that incident that happened yesterday. We're habitual beings. We function on habits. And by nature, the human body, including the human mind, I'm sad to say, we are quite lazy. If you just let it be on a default mode, in a sense. And we're always trying to avoid struggles, any type of struggles or any type of unpleasant situations. We're trying to camouflage it, kind of, cover it up with nice little sweeteners of other things that we like to do. And the Buddha's mission was to bring us back to the reality of things. And many people ask, well, Buddhism is, they make the statement, in fact, many people say, well, Buddhism is it's pessimistic. It talks about suffering. It talks about, come on, what about joy? What about happiness? What about, how come we can't enjoy Well, there is no reference to any of that in the Dhamma, where it says the teachings are not about joy. When the Buddha was pointing out the suffering aspect of dissatisfaction or stress, some teachers, give it their different labels, which pretty much they're saying the same thing, dukkha. They, the teachings themselves, they're talking about reality. So the Buddha was just bringing the people's attention back to the facts that were taking place in their lives. And how the attempts at sugarcoating reality by desires of things to hopefully come about within the next few seconds, a few years, would have somewhat toned down, subterfuge if you like, the fact of the uncomfortableness of whatever it is that the person was feeling. So in that sense, the mention of suffering itself has a totally different meaning, I would say. And that's what I believe, this is my understanding, the Buddha was trying to do in claiming it to be an Arya Satya, noble truth. There's no nobility about suffering. I mean, we all know that. You can ask a 10-year-old kid and they'll tell you that. But the realization of the fact that suffering itself is, well, unavoidable. And to possibly gain something from that realization brings this sense of nobility into the experiencing of it. And the same goes for the other three truths. There's mentions of, in the Dhammapada again, of the Buddha calling himself and the group, the Sangha, as well as the lay people, the community of Buddhists. And it's a beautiful phrase. In English, he states this, he says, "We are the happy ones." I mean, if that doesn't say something about, the opposite of thinking of Buddhism as a pessimistic practice. We are the happy ones. How many of us actually think about joy? Joy, real joy. When was the last time you've actually experienced it in a way where it was not necessarily conditioned? In a sense, it's unconditional joy. Is it possible? You can give it a shot. Is it possible? Joy.
Without conditions?
Without conditions.
If you reach nirvana, perhaps.
That's one possibility. The adherence to craving is so powerful. The attachment we have to, I want this, is so powerful, and you can't have I want this without I don't want that, thank you very much. By the way, these are the two poisons out of the three. And the third one is the mother of the other two, which is moha, which is the delusion of it, of making the choices in having whatever type of thought we want to have. And that is where I'm trying to get to, is to allow us, to encourage us to give it a second thought, in a sense. How much power each of our thoughts have within it. And that's why I chose the first verse of the Dhammapada. Thoughts. Later on the Buddha says, within the same verse, he says, much like the ox, thoughts also lead and actions follow, much like the cartwheel that will be pulled behind the ox. It's unavoidable. So in a sense, the thoughts we have are like those, they show the trajectory of our next words, our next actions. It's like they're our access to the future. It's a time machine. We have access to the future through the means of our thoughts. However, how many of us are aware of the thoughts we think, we process. Inevitably, the lives we live daily according to the thoughts that we've been having. Now, I understand the frustration there, because we are stuck in an upbringing that society has given us. There's this, I'm sure you've experienced this, when you feel good, when you tell someone, I feel great about this, I'm so excited about this and that, and the people around you go ahead and say, okay, you need to tone it down because something bad might happen. You shouldn't say that. Well, the person was joyful. They were really, really happy about it. The teacher comes in and says, no, you need to, too much joy, too much happiness can actually get you in trouble. My parents, when we used to play, me and my siblings, my parents would say that eventually. After such a great, happy moment, there might, a fight might break out between you two. And we don't want to come and separate you, so stop it. And society has so many myriad ways of teaching us the opposite of taking control over our thoughts. And this is powerful stuff. I mean, when you're looking at the Dhamma in a way where you kind of get the sense of, wow, this is really, I'm on the, I'm at the steering wheel. I'm holding it. But it is requiring of so much courage on our part. I one time read something about the meditation pose. This was years ago, and I think it was a Zen master's sermon that was written in this book, and he was saying something along the lines of, the meditator's position, of which the Buddha is the perfect example, is the ultimate act of courage. And I think he was responding to a samurai statement as to the samurai being the most powerful and courageous person ever alive. And any of you who've actually sat in meditation and you faced your hindrances head on, you know what courage is. When you have every urge in your body, in your mind, to get up and leave and do something constructive and just walk away from that session. Now, you do not need to be in that intense, pivotal, moment of singularity that meditation is bringing you to on a constant basis through awareness. However, we can bring that awareness into our daily lives. In that sense, my understanding is that through awareness, life can take place, and life can be fun, life can be happy, life can be joyous. Do you know that on a daily basis, we have over 65,000 thoughts on average? This is, science-backed, basically, evidence-based. 65,000 thoughts per day. Now, the scientists who were conducting these experiments, they also came to the conclusion that 87% of those thoughts were negative. 87%, almost 90%. Tells you something. The frequency or the vibrational output that each of us has as individuals can really influence the world around us. You've possibly walked into a room one time or another and you feel this energy and you just want to leave. And other times you walk in and you feel so amazing. Especially in children's rooms, for example. Like sometimes when I'm playing with my nieces, for example, I feel so much love there. And it's like the energy frequency, vibrational frequency is so high, there's so much joy there. Other times you just, this is unbearable type of a feeling. I haven't been to India, but I've heard some teachers mention how they have gone to where the Jeta's Grove is, or used to be Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's Park, which we hear about constantly in the suttas, where the Buddha spent over 20 years his vasas. Vasas are the rains retreat, about 3 months long, in the monsoon season in India, where the Buddha made it a rule where his monks, himself included, were not to leave a single site, to avoid the possible killing of insects and sprouting life all around them, because there was so much water in India and sprouting plants and insects all over the place. By accidentally stepping on them, that would cause death, killing. So, and plus this was giving them an opportunity to practice and to go over the teachings, and many wonderful things used to happen in those 3 months. So anyhow, the Buddha had done over 20 of those in this location in India. And some texts call that room of his within that monastery the fragrant room, chamber. There is no chamber left. There's probably tiny little edges of what the monastery used to be. However, those who meditate, and some of the teachers that I've spoken to, they said there is this wonderful feeling there. When you go there, you do not want to leave. It just grabs hold of you, and it's wonderful to sit and explore the potentialities of the mind and feel that joy and tranquility that's there, left there over 2,600 years ago, almost 26 centuries ago. Now, what I'm talking about is the vibration and frequency of each of us that we have. Now, there's an intention behind me mentioning this, because in connection to what we were talking about, the negative preponderance of our 65,000 daily thoughts that we have. That will leave its own stamping on the rest of our lives and the lives of others. It's pretty powerful stuff that each of us has, starting with our own lives and the lives of those people that we love and care for and want nothing but great things to happen to them. Our pets, our yards, our plants, our neighbors, our colleagues, our future. So, the Dhamma is there to encourage us, to give us that support, to bring the attention back to us. The Dhamma does not have to be such esoteric, such analytical, such in-depth analysis of the Buddha's teachings, or memorizations of all these numbers. Bojjhangas have 7 factors of awakening, and 4 noble truths have all these 4 bases of power, all these things, and that can be overwhelming for many of us. If you can just carry with you throughout the day the fact that your day unfolds based on every single one of your thoughts, that's manageable, I would think. Especially when it starts the night. Like 5 minutes if you can take just for yourself to just process the daily happenings that you went through and the intentions for the next day. That's very good ground to actually go ahead and start your morning, because that will allow you to wake up with a sense of lightness. In fact, I tell people, just before you can put the alarm on, don't hit the snooze button though, once it starts, just stay in bed though, for a few minutes. You can have your eyes shut still, that's okay, just keep smiling though. Think about the wonderful things that are about to unfold in your day. Mind is the forerunner of all states, evil or good. 87% of our thoughts. That's dangerous stuff. Now here's another number that scientists came up with. Did you know that over 99% of negative thoughts are totally baseless? 99% of our negative thoughts are completely irrational. We know deep down when we actually ponder over them, just to think about them, process them, that we know that they're not based on reality. They're based on our fears of what the reality might unfold into, but that's plenty of evidence for us to keep thinking along the same lines. And then we wonder why we have so much stress, why we have so much cancer, cases of cancer, how many people are depressed. It's pretty amazing how we have let go of the steering wheel of our lives. And we have plenty of reasons, we have plenty of culprits, we have plenty of things to blame for it. Well, it's living in a, such a huge metropolitan city, you have a lot of nasty people running the city, or you have this nasty people running the government, or you have these nasty people causing so much harm to the environment, etc., etc. It's all about the outside world causing me to be in this tumultuous state of being, when it is our lot, when it is our right, our inheritance, our innate nature to be, tranquil and joyful. And no, it does not have necessarily to do anything with getting our objectives met. You can start with a smile. Bhante Vimalaramsi, he mentions constantly, he's my teacher, he mentions so many times about, the four aspects of right effort. Bhante Punnaji calls it the harmonious exercise, which is the same thing as samma vayama, right effort. He says, well, first of all, we need to abstain from the negative, unwholesome, akusala kamma, akusala thought, or whatever that is unwholesome. We need to abstain from it, prevent it from occurring, stop it, actually, the moment it shows up. And then the second right effort, portion of the right effort, is about eliminating any possibilities, any modes, any causes that might, uncover that unwholesome factor. It might be a part of the neighborhood that if we pass by it, we know what the next consequence would be. We might stop by and buy the thing that we never wanted to buy. However, we said, yeah, it's okay, let's pass by that neighborhood, that street, and the next thought. The next thought. All of a sudden you're purchasing it, whatever. This is basically one of the downfalls of addicts, drug or substance abuse. This is what happens. And the third one, however, of the third aspect of right effort or harmonious exercise is cultivating the opposite of those qualities, cultivating something positive or wholesome. And this is what Bhante Vimalaramsi says, smile. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. Sometimes what happens to me, I know from my life, when I'm moving about my house, sometimes I'm in a rush, I need to leave the house, and all of a sudden I realize that the meal that I had prepped from the night before, and I had kept it in the fridge or whatever, and I'm running late, I placed it on the counter, and I got everything else, and I left the house, and I'm halfway to my destination, and all of a sudden, I remember that I left it there on the counter, and that was my meal. I don't have the time to drive back. So immediately, my old conditioned way of thinking will still be there in the background, but it's going to use that very juicy, fertile opportunity for itself to come out and say, see how unfair life is? You prepared this, and why did this happen? So it's a great opportunity for one of the poisons to arise, which is, I hate this. This is so bad. And then you start pointing the finger at yourself. Oh, how stupid I was to leave that thing on. How could I not be aware, etc., etc. Or, choose the third of the right effort steps. Laugh it off. That was quite silly of me. How funny is that? That you do all that and then only to find out that it's going to end up going into the trash can. That's okay. And then you see that as an opportunity for growth itself, because you just overcame your I wouldn't say natural, but the conditioned way of, habitual way of thinking that has been with us for eons, for many lifetimes that we've been brewed in this. To come to that point where you say, well, you know what? Let me look at this. I've been angry many times, obviously. All of us have. And we know what it tastes like. We know the flavor of anger, of hatred towards ourselves, first and foremost, from which comes the hatred towards the outside world. That's how we identify something negative, something nasty in other people, simply because we have the prototype within us in our way of thinking. And then the more we habitually start this new cultivation of this way of thinking, of wholesome thoughts, wholesome ways of responding, not reacting, allows us to go through these similar experiences again and again, in different conditions obviously, in different objects, different things happening, but opportunities are there for us to use the fourth aspect of the right effort chain, which is maintaining that. You know, what is a ritual? A ritual is basically consistently done, meaningful action that have something to do with your way of understanding, of processing life, etc. Something that has a higher purpose for you. And the same applies for meditation. You might do some meditation once a week, and then the next day you'll do 4 days, and it will be intense meditation, and then there's this break off, and you just don't do meditation for 2 months, and then you come back in and do an hour. That's not going to get us far. However, if you can sit for 5 minutes a day, even 5 minutes is something, where you actually are breathing, aware of your breath, or just thinking about right effort, thinking about, okay, just becoming aware. I could have been angry, but I chose not to. Why? Process it. Become aware of it. And then you'll see that there is no personality there. It's just different things happening, and it's all a process, not personality. It's all a process. We're functioning on habitual tendencies. There's a lack of relaxation there. There's a lack of recognition. There's a lack of our dignity, our integrity in making our choices, intentionally choosing our thoughts. Yes, it does put the responsibility in our laps. But that's why it's so juicy, it's so wonderful, because it gives us also the prize at the end of that moment, not at the end of our lives, by the way. It's so easy for us to rely on the wondrous nature of this thing we call future. Right? No, but you don't get it. Like 2 seconds later, things are going to be so amazing. But just let's let things be now the way they are. Just let's forget about it. Let's not make any serious decision about it. Let's go on doing the same thing we've done all our lives. It's okay. Nothing's going to change. Especially if you believe in rebirth. It doesn't make a difference. Let's just in the next 3 seconds, wonderful things are going to take place. Everything is going to change. Right? Sounds familiar? That's the procrastinator's mind. And we are all procrastinators at one point or another. You know, I make these notes to include in my Dhamma talk. I never use them. So, how are we with time? Michael?
Yeah, almost.
Almost. Just to remind us of something that you probably have heard so many times throughout your lifetimes. We function, we have a brain that is full of 100 billion neurons. 100 billion. Now, in order for there to be life in any organism, whether it's a single-cell organism, whatever, multi-cell, if it has one neuron within it, as far as science is concerned, biology is concerned, we call that living. There's life. And when there are two neurons in that entity, in that organism, there occurs movement. And in a movie, Lucy, I think it's that came out a few years ago, Morgan Freeman's character, who happens to be this, top, biologist, evolutionary biologist, I believe, he mentions that when you have two neurons, you have movement, but when you have movement, interesting things start to happen. Now we have 100 billion of them, give or take a few million. How much of it are we using? With all our technologies, you go and look at the most brilliant architecture out there. Incredible music that Mozart written, or whoever. That was approximately 10% of our brain's functionality that was used. The rest of the life of the person is just spent in limbo. Limbo in the sense of just following along our habits of thinking. And that's what the Buddha was constantly talking about when he mentioned the three poisons, defilements in a sense, kileshas. Moha, which is delusion of all of that was mentioned, meaning not becoming aware, completely forgetting or walking away from that responsibility of making a choice when it comes to your thoughts. And when you figure out the moha, you also see the fact that lobha and dosa have to play. Lobha is the greed or lust for things. Lust doesn't necessarily mean sexuality or sensuality, just wanting things, addiction to things. I want this. And then conversely, the opposite of that, which is dosa, which is the hatred or the unwillingness to accept. Now, being a joyful person, if you're a Buddhist or if you're a person who's just living intentionally, you're still going to experience loss, you're still going to experience grief, you're still going to experience unpleasant things happening in your life. However, the attachment, the position that you have within yourself towards those things, that is where the whole crux of the matter is. And having a lighter touch in those moments is crucial, because your tranquility of mind, your joyful state will not be touched. Even if you lose someone you love very much, you will feel the excruciating pain of losing someone. However, your state of mind, you're solid, your foundation is solid, because you know that this is part of life, part of the process. So, thank you for listening. Questions for later or now? Are there any questions?
No question.
No questions. Okay. Thank you.